Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our Product Stewardship in Action session. We had a lot of great morning sessions, great keynote speaker. I hopped into the youth activism panel, and we had some amazing high schoolers like creating their own programs in their own schools and communities. So that was great to see. Yeah, so I'm just going to get started. I'll kind of go through a definition of what is product stewardship. I'll read the speaker bios, and then we'll jump into our first questions. They can also do a little mini bio if they want to reintroduce themselves. So product stewardship is pretty finicky, so I wanted to get the definition right. Here's one example of a definition from the Product Stewardship Council. Product stewardship is the act of minimizing the health, safety, environmental, and social impacts of a product and its packaging throughout all life cycle stages, while also maximizing economic benefits. So the manufacturer or producer of the product has the greatest ability to minimize adverse impacts, but other stakeholders such as suppliers, retailers, and consumers also play a role. Usually product stewardship is voluntary, but it can be required by law. Okay, and so now I'm going to read the speakers. Thanks again so much to the speakers for joining us today on their Saturday. We're really excited to host this panel and educate the youth on what product stewardship is. And this session is going to focus on 1 pound propane cylinders, but this does apply to other problem products that we see in our society. So first, Courtney. So Courtney Scott is the HHW Program Manager, Household Hazardous Waste Program Manager for Zero Waste Sonoma, which is currently an all-female agency, managing the HHW, e-waste, and OPP programs. Do you want to say what OPP stands for?
Yeah, that's the Oil Payment Program, which is the CalRecycle funded program for the recycling of oil. Motor oil.
Cool, thank you. We got a nice picture there. She lives in Santa Rosa with her husband and 2 rescue dogs, where she likes to garden, birdwatch, kayak, sew, and knit. She loves animals and is passionate about protecting the environment. Courtney has a BA from CSU Chico in psychology and a minor in environmental studies. In college, she volunteered for several environmental organizations and created a sustainability consulting group that remains on campus 14 years later. So welcome, Courtney. Next, I will introduce my supervisor at California Product Stewardship Council, Nate Pelzar. He is a special projects manager at CPSC, which is a nonprofit dedicated to producer responsibility policy and driving a circular economy. So Nate managed CPSC's largest grant project, the California Drug Take Back Program, via a $3 million grant from the California Department of Healthcare Services to combat the opioid epidemic. He oversaw the installation of hundreds of medicine take-back bins in communities across California. So you might see them in your local Safeways and other stores in your area. Nate is also involved in the management of over a dozen grants related to the reduction of household hazardous waste, like single-use propane cylinders and other material management issues. He holds a Master in Public Affairs from Indiana University, and he serves as the board treasurer of the North American Hazardous Materials Management Association, California chapter, and he's a board member of the Solid Waste Association of North America, California Gold Rush chapter. Thank you, Nate, for joining us today in our conversation. And I will now introduce Josh with these lovely pictures here. Josh Simpson was raised in Berkeley, California, where his family started recycling glass, metal, and newspaper at a community-run recycling center in the early 70s. His family started backpacking with the Sierra Club when he was in 1st grade and spent many of his teenage summers camping and backpacking all over California. His commitment to environmental stewardship grew from his time as a Boy Scout and has continued through community service projects over the last 4 decades. Josh is a UC San Diego grad and one of the co-founders of Little Camper LP. He lives in Brentwood, California with his wife, 2 kids, and Milo the Wonder Dog. So thank you, Josh, for joining us here today. These pictures are great. I'm going to keep these up just for a little bit here, and then I'll take them down just so everyone can kind of look at the pictures and absorb, because this is going to be the main thing that we're talking about today, which is single use versus reusable 1-pound propane cylinders. So we'll get started with the first question. I'll direct this first towards Courtney. How did your career lead you towards product stewardship work? And then describe in more detail what you do today on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here today. My career led me towards product stewardship kind of by accident. I graduated college during the 2008 recession, and it was a miserable time to graduate college. And so I was just trying to get any work that I felt like I was protecting the environment. And so I was just kind of applying to any environmental job I could. I ended up doing an AmeriCorps with the Conservation Corps North Bay and focused on things like waste audits and energy audits. And then after that, I was able to get a job with the San Rafael Fire Department. And that was actually managing the household hazardous waste program for Marin County. And household hazardous waste, I'm just going to assume that some people don't know what that is. So it is a category of waste that cannot go in garbage, recycling, or organics. It's stuff that generally is hazardous, meaning either toxic to human health, environmental health, or animal health. It is either corrosive, meaning strongly acidic or strongly basic, or it could be flammable, which is maybe explosive or combustible. So those are the main categories of waste, and things that we would find at the house that are considered household hazardous waste are things like in California, batteries, paint, fluorescent bulbs, fertilizers, pesticides, and then of course these 1-pound propane cylinders. Propane and compressed gas is also on our list of hazardous waste, things that we collect through our programs. So through my time at the San Rafael Fire Department, actually the second year that I was there, the state passed the paint care program, paint care legislation. So that meant that we were going to start a new stewardship program, product stewardship program for architectural paint. So paint that you would use on your house. And so that was my first introduction to product stewardship, and working through that contract with Paint Care, the stewardship organization, and me as the generator of that waste. And describe what I do on a day-to-day basis. I am pretty much a contract manager. I manage a household hazardous waste facility, so a permanent facility where people can bring their hazardous waste. And I manage temporary events, and then I do back-end stuff. Like most recently, I am in the process of working on a product stewardship and/or extended producer responsibility for batteries policy or ordinance for those of us in Sonoma County. So that's what I do day to day. I don't actually work at the facility or handle the waste. I am certified to do that, but I don't. I'm mostly I work at the desk doing contract management. And I also had a grant through CalRecycle and in partnership with CPSC, a 3-year grant to set up a Refuel Your Fun program here in Sonoma County. So through that, we were able to get 8 retail locations to sell, refill, or exchange propane cylinders. And then we also were able to set up a program to collect disposable cylinders at some of our campgrounds in Sonoma County.
Great, thank you so much, Courtney. And I'll pass it on to Nate. How did your career lead you towards product stewardship work? And then what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so after graduating a number of years ago from college with a business degree and spending some time as a teacher, I realized that it was very important to change the public's behaviors in certain areas that would make our world more sustainable. Sustainability was becoming a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a cliche, but it clearly has value to people who lived where I was living at the time, which is in the Midwest, because the economy there is so focused on tourism and ecotourism, enjoying the lakes and the hills and going skiing and all those types of things. So it was, ever present. So what I decided to do at that point was to go on to grad school and study public policy. And going to Indiana University, which has one of the best public policy schools in the nation, they really helped reorient me and obtain a focus on public policies that could help improve what was most important to me, which is the environment and making sure that we're on the path towards sustainability. So after working for over a decade as a project manager in the areas of government consulting and financial consulting, I decided to make a big switch and take a job with the California Product Stewardship Council, which is a 501c3 based out of Sacramento, that focuses primarily on advocacy and education in the areas of green design and extended producer responsibility. So they're really the boots on the ground when it comes to educating folks in California and encouraging them to make behavior change in the areas that put us on the path towards environmental sustainability. So I find my current job fascinating because it allows me to do a lot of the things that are very important to me: educating and advocacy. Somebody with a graduate degree in public policy, advocacy is right up my alley. And somebody who's worked in the past as a teacher and enjoys bringing people up to speed on how to become more sustainable, how to redesign their products to be green, how to operate as a producer that wants to participate in an extended producer responsibility program. We do all of that at CPSC. So I'm happy as a clam and happy to do and contribute towards the mission of CPSC. On a day-to-day basis, what I do is I manage projects, large and small. And each of those projects are focused on changing the behavior of Californians so that they're, again, on the path towards sustainability from an environmental perspective. So we encourage folks to make behavior changes in all areas of their lives where there's a benefit to be obtained when switching from single-use products to reusable products. So you mentioned one campaign specifically, the Refuel Your Fun campaign. And the focus of that one is to really switch people from the single-use 1 pound propane cylinders to the reusable cylinders. And these are actually easy changes to make. A lot of people don't even know these options exist. So we find ourselves educating folks simply on the options that they have to choose from. We help them understand, the few steps that they need to take to make these changes, how they can benefit from a financial perspective by switching to reusables. It's oftentimes cheaper to switch from single-use to reusables. I spend a lot of time really helping people understand the world around them and how they can make small changes in their daily lives to make the world a better place for all of us.
That's great. Thank you, Nate. And I agree with your statement on sustainability being a buzzword, years ago. And I feel like we're in a really exciting time right now. It's, John Oliver is making segments on APR and product stewardship, and
yes,
he had a segment on PFAS and these other problem products and chemicals that we're facing today. So exciting time. And Josh, how did your career lead you towards product stewardship work? And what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So I'm imagining that a lot of the people on this call are familiar with the game Chutes and Ladders. And I think that the truth is that I got here in a career path that was a lot like playing Chutes and Ladders, because I graduated and my career path in the short term took me into the telecommunications industry, and I learned a lot of the things that I do from a marketing perspective in that part of my career, and worked for small companies and big companies, and really gained a lot of hands-on expertise in growing a business and trying to communicate to customers and try to communicate to people who are not customers to encourage them to become customers. And over the course of time, I gradually kind of learned a lot of the things that I do now that I didn't learn in college. So I would point out that that part of my career experience has come from the combination of my time at UCSD and then the things that I learned since I graduated. But I was fortunate enough over the course of time to have intersections in my career where I was working with different organizations that were doing things that were intended to promote environmental awareness and to encourage good environmental behavior. And that's always been something that I was practicing based upon my life experience. But I had the opportunity through some of those projects to gain experience in working with organizations that were tackling bigger projects and when we're trying to encourage behavior that was better for the environment. And so fast forward to about close to 10 years ago, I took a job working as the director of marketing for a company in California that's a large company in the propane industry. And one of the things that happened not long after I arrived on that job was that I realized that there were things the company was doing that were very interesting to me that I didn't even know about when I first started working there. One of those things was that the company had developed a pathway that allowed them to properly recycle used propane cylinders, in particular 1-pound propane cylinders. And one of the days when I was working, I was walking through the facility where we are, and a delivery came in from Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park that was an enormous quantity of 1-pound propane cylinders. And it dawned on me at that moment that the cylinders, as I had used them, always seemed to be something that I didn't really think that much about. But it's the power of numbers conversation. Unfortunately, we tend to internalize what we do without realizing that there's an external component to our own behavior, because I didn't really think that much about the fact that I would use a 1-pound propane cylinder until I realized that so many other people were using them, and that after using them, all of them went somewhere. It was when I saw what it looked like for those numbers to add up when those cylinders were delivered to our recycling facility that it dawned on me that that was actually a much bigger problem than I ever imagined. Fast forward about a year and a half after that, the company Flame King that basically invented the reusable 1-pound propane cylinder, they were going to propane companies all over the United States and asking those companies if they would introduce that cylinder to their customers. And I think they were having a lot of difficulty because most propane companies weren't really interested in trying to sell propane 16 ounces at a time. That's really not what propane companies do. And we were in a meeting and they were talking about the ways in which the cylinder could be beneficial to customers and beneficial to the environment. And it dawned on me that, in fact, the most likely way that that would become possible is if there was a way to buy propane in a 1-pound cylinder that was refillable and reusable in a store the same way a lot of people buy propane for their barbecues. So you walk in with an empty cylinder, you exchange it for a filled cylinder. It's a simple transaction, and it makes it easy for people to buy the propane that they want to use 7 days a week in places all over, at stores and hardware stores and grocery stores and convenience stores, et cetera, et cetera. So I asked the people I was working with if that seemed like a good idea to them. And I think they were kind of amused by the fact that I was asking this question, because I was the outdoor enthusiast of the group. I was the backpacker, I was the camper, and most of the people that I work with were not really into that kind of behavior. And the feedback that they gave me was that it was an interesting idea and they were willing to let me try it as a project. And so we created what we now call the Little Camper program, which is 1-pound propane cylinder exchange that we handle as a business. We buy the cylinders from Flame King. We fill the cylinders with an automated filling system. We ship the cylinders to retailers all over the West. They sell them to their customers. When the customers are done using the cylinders, they bring them back to one of our stores. They exchange an empty cylinder for a filled cylinder. And every one of those cylinder exchanges represents one less cylinder going into the waste stream. So the thing that I would just offer as an observation, based upon my career experience and how I got to where I am right now, is that if you're paying attention to what's going on around you, you have no way of knowing at what point, whether it's tomorrow or some point down the road, when an opportunity may present itself to you based upon what's important to you and what's around you, where you can actually do something that could ultimately make a really big difference in the environment. We are really excited about the Little Camper program, and we're very hopeful that it can become a successful way of reducing propane tank waste. And really, it's all possible just because, from my personal history, wanting to enjoy the outdoors, and then the resources that came at my disposal from working where I worked, that all of this came to be. So it's kind of amazing, but that's how it happened.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. And I think it is blowing up, you know, like Little Camper, I'm seeing it everywhere. And at CPSC, I manage, and actually I'll share my screen right now. Let's see here. Can you see my screen? Okay. So yeah, talking about the Refill Your Fun and Save program. Try to fix this up here. So if you go to refillyourfun.org, this is the website where we have the program. This program was created and is administered by CPSC with funding from Cal Recycle. So like Courtney said, you know, we worked with Zero Waste Sonoma on a grant project with them. And you can go to this map and events page here. And we have a retailer map of the locations across the state, if it'll load, that sell, refill, or exchange the reusable 1-pound propane cylinders. So this is pretty nifty, and you can see it's been growing a lot, and I've been updating this on a regular basis, and it's really exciting to see that this program is being taken up by retailers, and you know, local communities are, you know, starting to become educated on this household hazardous waste that ends up in the waste stream, and then local governments like Courtney, they have to deal with that. So just wanted to show that. And so, you know, it's kind of interesting because we're all coming in from different perspectives, and we've all worked together. And so kind of want to hear from you guys. I'll start with Courtney. What are some of the successes and challenges that you face at your work when promoting reusables and educating people about the impact of single waste use?
Sure. So I just real quick want to back up and discuss why it's important to collect these responsibly. So 1-pound propane cylinders, it is a compressed flammable gas, and so it can explode essentially. So they cannot go in the garbage, because in a garbage truck, metal to metal could either cause a spark, or they could get compressed when the garbage truck is compressing. So that's dangerous for both the truck and the driver. It's also dangerous once that cylinder is brought to, say, it accidentally makes its way to a recycling facility during the sorting process. It can also metal to metal contact or even get shredded, and that would cause an explosion too. So it's dangerous for equipment, facilities, and people. You know, there's people all along the way in the garbage process. And so we want to make sure that all of these are collected responsibly to minimize any damage or health hazards. And so I would say some of the challenges we've had in collecting the reusables is, well, not collecting the reusables, but collecting the 1 pound propane cylinders is the sheer volume of them. I mean, they are just omnipresent, it seems, and a lot of people don't recognize them as a hazardous waste. So a lot of them do make it into either the trash can or the recycling bin instead of being taken to a hazardous waste facility. So that's part of the message that we give to the public when trying to educate them on why it's important to switch to the refillable ones. Some of the challenges we also face in educating about the 1 pound propane cylinders is that people think that they can refill the regular ones that they get. And like, those are meant to be the Coleman ones or whatever ones you find in the general camping section. Those are generally meant to be a one-time use. They are not safe to be refilled. But I get a lot of people arguing, saying like, you know, oh, I refill it all the time, or, you know, they go through this crazy procedure and it's so dangerous. You have to like freeze it for an exact amount of minutes in your freezer, and then you have to like put it upside down, and it's so dangerous. So really trying to get through to the stubborn customers who think that the regular 1 pounders are refillable, trying to explain to them the safety and that the new ones were actually designed to be refilled is really important to us. And some of the successes are, there is one retailer in particular that has a really great program. It's an outdoor retail store, and they have, I think, like 10 locations across the Bay Area, and they refill it internally, and they just have this really great system. And if you are a member of this retail location, you get free refills if you exchange it. So, I mean, that's super awesome. So that's one of my favorite successes there. And also just seeing the need for this. And in Sonoma County, people are really excited about it. They want to support this program. So yeah, those are some of the successes and challenges.
Yeah, that's great. Excited to hear that there's a lot of participating retailers in your area. Okay, so Nate, what are the successes and challenges that you face at CPSC when promoting reusables and educating people?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges. And as I mentioned earlier, it really comes down to fomenting behavior change. You have to educate people and make them come to their own realizations that it's actually in their own best interest for any number of reasons to make the behavior switch from whatever they're doing here, you know, to something that's better for everyone involved. So, you know, it really kind of warms my heart to hear Courtney talk about the frustrations that she deals with in encouraging folks to make behavior changes when it comes to refilling cylinders, the actual refillable cylinders, not the single-use cylinders, because that's something we grapple with at CPSC almost on a daily basis. Every time we post on social media about the Refill Your Fun campaign, we always get comments in the comment section about how folks, you know, they're so proud of themselves because they're, you know, expressing their self-sufficiency and their ability to get the job done, which is very good, very admirable. But, you know, in an effort to save themselves $1.50, they're putting their physical bodies at risk. You know, people have literally blown their faces off on the process of refilling these things because you never really know when it's full. And there's just so much risk involved. You know, if there's an open flame nearby, kablooey. So the challenge really is just educating people, as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, on why the risks that they're assuming aren't worth it, and why there's so much opportunity and potential advantages to be obtained by making these small behavior changes. So instead of spending an hour and a half freezing the gas and preparing everything out on the patio in the back lot. And, you know, it's really a project to refill these single-use cylinders, and it's extremely dangerous. So we just try to emphasize to people that not only is it very inexpensive, but it's also extremely cheap and easy, really. So we try to promote all the pros and just make sure that people understand that there's a lot of value in taking this better, safer, less risky route. So that's been the biggest challenge. The biggest success really is getting people over the finish line and making those behavior changes where they actually on their own see the benefits after they've made these behavior changes, and then they start doing it over and over and over again. And they do it so many times that it actually becomes a habit. And then they start telling their friends and their family members and other members of their community about the behavior changes they've made. So then they start making their own behavior changes, and it becomes almost contagious. And eventually you've got a community that has made this major behavior change. The community itself has benefited as a whole. The individuals have benefited as individuals, and you know, everyone in the state benefits because we've got less waste going to the landfills. We're actually moving and shifting to circularity, where instead of mining these resources, processing them, using them, and then pitching them into the dump, we're reintroducing those cylinders back into the system. This exchange program that Josh mentioned is just brilliant because it stops the flow of waste into the landfills, and it refocuses people on really what we're trying to do here, which is to understand the advantages of sustainability and circularity, and just really to bring them to the realization that we have a finite amount of resources on this world, and we need to do more to protect it and to make sure that we're being efficient and effective when it comes to using these resources. So that gives you a bit of an understanding of the successes and challenges in the work that we do at CPSC. And I mentioned before that, you know, another one of the biggest challenges is really just advocating and educating people and helping them come to the realization on their own, facilitating them and their ability to connect the dots on why these things are important and why they need to make these changes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Nate. And Josh, what are some of the successes and challenges that you face at your work with Little Camper? And you're on mute.
There we go. That's better.
Okay.
Thank you. First thing I would point out on successes is that, you know, really what we've proven, I think, through the amount of progress that we've made over the, you know, last 5-6 years we've been doing this, is that the collaboration with stakeholders has really put momentum behind what we're doing. So when there are people like Courtney and people like Nate and organizations like Stop Waste Sonoma and the CPSC and others that we've worked with, it's amazing what we can accomplish when we find people who have shared values and who want to try and make a difference solving problems like this, because none of us could possibly do it alone, even with tremendous amounts of resources. But together, it's clear to me that we're on the path to making a big difference with this problem. Now, in terms of challenges, what I would point out is that, you know, and I think that Courtney and Nate have both pointed this out, but I'll reiterate it. There's a substantial amount of hazard associated with the reuse of a 1-pound cylinder that is designed to be essentially used and then thrown away and hopefully recycled. Encouraging people to use that cylinder properly is its own real challenge, and educating people to use the cylinder and then make sure that it is thrown away in a way that it ultimately leads to it being recycled is a really big problem, because so many of those cylinders in places that are not like Sonoma County end up in landfills. And we recycle hundreds of thousands of them at our facility in Manteca every year. But unfortunately, that's the tip of the iceberg. There are millions of these cylinders manufactured and used in the United States every year, and only a small percentage of them are being recycled. And that's a problem that's going to continue to create real hazard in our waste stream, whether it's, as Courtney pointed out, by the folks who are collecting waste and driving garbage trucks, or the people who are sorting waste and trying to make sure that reusable materials get diverted out of the landfills. It's a really big challenge for us to simultaneously encourage sustainable practices while also discouraging people from adopting practices that they believe are sustainable, but in fact are much more hazardous than they are worthwhile. The one other thing I will point out that I think is a really important part of this conversation is that people often use 1 pound propane cylinders because they are the least expensive way to get propane for outdoor recreation. You walk into a place like a big box store and they may be sold for as little as like 2 for $6. And that's a really appealing convenience for people who want the propane so that they can go on a camping trip or, you know, for picnicking or tailgating. But what those people don't realize is when they're buying the product at that low price, part of the reason why it's so cheap is because they're not paying for its proper disposal. And when they pass the buck, literally, on the cost of the fuel that they're using and essentially pass it along to organizations like Cal Recycle, which funds the grants that help to clean up this problem, and our national parks that unfortunately have to pay for the collection, transportation, and recycling of those cylinders. What many of those people don't understand is that even if they don't want to pay more for propane, there's a way for them to do that simply by investing in an adapter hose and using a refillable propane cylinder like the kind that people use for their barbecues at home, and also for smaller tanks that are more convenient for some people because of their size. You can buy a 1 gallon propane tank, you can buy a 2.5 gallon propane tank. Those tanks can be refilled at local gas stations. They can be refilled by local propane marketers like my employer. The truth of the matter is that when you're buying a 1 pound propane tank at a big box store for $3 a piece, you're actually paying $12 a gallon for propane. $12 a gallon for propane is not a bargain. It's actually about 4 times the cost of what a gallon of propane costs if you buy it from a company that dispenses it into portable cylinders, whether it's a local gas station or a propane marketer. So I'm just saying this to point out to people that if you're using 1 pound cylinders and you look at what we're doing with Little Camper does not externalize the cost of our customers using propane in 1 pound containers. Our customers pay for the cost of the propane that they're using and the transportation of the cylinder and its end of life retirement. That's part of the beauty of what we're doing. But if the cost of what we're doing doesn't fit in your budget, the simple answer is that you can reduce waste and save money on propane just by going to a local hardware store and investing in a $25 adapter hose and buying a refillable propane tank and using propane inexpensively, but reducing waste at the same time. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, and like Josh was saying, you know, there are the adapters, and we also, you know, on the map that we have on the refuelyourfund.org, you can go on there and see which places will professionally refill for you as well. And so just want to make an announcement to please put your questions in the chat. We'll have one more question, but I have a mini question for Josh. What are some of the like camping gear that people can use these reusable 1 pound propane cylinders with?
So the most popular device that people use these small cylinders for is actually a like a 2-burner camping stove. These are stoves that, 25 years ago would have run on white gas, which is not a very environmentally friendly fuel. Propane is much better for the environment, much safer to use than white gas. If you look at the portable camping stoves, those are by far the most popular. There are portable barbecues that you see when you go to picnic areas and tailgating at sporting facilities. Lanterns, portable heaters. Some people use them for small torches. Actually, some restaurants use them in kitchens for different parts of their cooking processes. But the reality of it is that the fuel's terrific because it's portable as a compressed gas. It's very efficient. But the reality of it is that whether you're talking about a camp stove, a barbecue, a heater, a lantern, whatever the device may be, using a sustainable zero waste cylinder is the right way to use that fuel.
Great, thank you so much, Josh. And we'll move along to our last question. And I'll start with Courtney. So what can our viewers, many of which are young professionals or students, what can they do in their communities to be a steward of change for problem products like propane cylinders and other household hazardous waste?
Good question. I think some others might have some similar responses, but I would say to ask your retailers in your local stores to participate in these types of programs. So if you go to a store and you're trying to purchase propane for your camping trip and all they offer is the disposable cylinders, help us out by telling them that this stuff exists, these programs exist, these refillable cylinders exist, and ask them if they're interested in selling them or participating in the exchange and refill programs. Some stores are not going to be able to participate with actually supplying gas because they don't have like the proper adapters or permits for propane, but they can partner with people like Josh and get a new exchange program going. So I would just say, ask your retailers to participate, help educate them about these new products that are zero waste products that are coming on the market. I would also say that there are constantly statewide legislation being proposed and for new EPR programs or product stewardship programs. And when those come along, please support them, write letters of support, follow CPSC on social media and figure out where they are in the legislation process and figure out when it's comment time and help us with those comments.
Great, thank you, Courtney. And also follow Zero Waste Sonoma on Instagram and Facebook. I follow them on Instagram and I'm always seeing their posts with a lot of information, which is really nice. And Nate, so what can our viewers do in their communities to be a steward of change for problem products?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Kamryn. There's so much you can do. It just really depends on where your area of interest is. So as I mentioned before, what CPSC does is we focus on education and advocacy because that's where we feel we can make the greatest positive impact, and that's where we've been the most successful. But as an individual, what I would do is take a step back and think about really where your interests are and where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, and then start making inroads going down that path. So me, what I've always done, because I've got a strong interest in public policy, obviously I joined CPSC, but as an individual, I'm very interested in politics. So one of the ways you can encourage local change is by reaching out to local politicians and letting them know the kind of changes you want to see in your community. So reaching out to retailers is a critical component. I'm really glad Courtney mentioned that. You really need to impact the marketplace and make sure that the business owners understand that consumers want to buy these things. Otherwise, they're never going to take the risk and they're never going to offer those things to the consumers. But you have to apply simultaneously local political pressure on the politicians to make sure that they make the changes that essentially work as a foundation for the business community. They either create a system of incentives or disincentives to push the behavior we want to see in the direction we want it to go. So what that means locally is you could pass an ordinance like what Courtney's doing. Courtney's working very hard on a battery ordinance, and she can talk a bit more about what that actually means in the ordinance, but it essentially restricts behavior in certain senses and forces consumers to have certain options available to them when it comes to batteries. So ordinance is a really good way, but just make sure you're in touch and in communication, either individually or through another organization with local city council members, county supervisors, leaders of local nonprofits that operate in the local area, meaning city, town, county, or on a statewide basis, because they're the ones that are able to get traction in ways that you might not be able to. So as I mentioned, take a step back, think about the direction you want to see the community go, and then start putting into place a plan that's going to take you, up the first rung of the ladder, then to the next, then to the next, until you reach your goal at the top of the ladder, which is either an ordinance or prohibition of a especially toxic or dangerous or expensive to process product. That's how you really get change done. It's really, people say democracy is not, it really requires people to be active and to actually vote and to be participatory. That's totally true. And it's especially true when it comes to impacting policy on a local and statewide basis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nate. And being mindful of time, we do have 3 more minutes. So I'll pass it on to Josh. What can our viewers do in their communities to be a steward of change?
First thing I would observe is that, it's the 21st century. Your attention in terms of what companies you support matters. So whether you come to social media channels looking to support companies, or whether you come to social media channels looking to use your voice to oppose practices that create waste that citizens then have to pay for cleaning up, I would encourage you to adopt a mindset of taking action. We genuinely appreciate the support of the people who are following us on social media, because we know that companies that are thinking about whether or not they should use our program in their stores are looking at our social media channels. They want to know, how many followers does this company have? What do people say about this program? So that's one thing. Another thing is, going back to what Nate said, I think it really does matter to, engage on a level where you can actually say that you've reached out to the people who influence public policy around the handling of waste in the communities where you live. So whether it's a local ordinance in your city council, or whether it's a county ordinance in your county commission, or you're talking about stuff that happens on the state, or things that happen in Washington, D.C., use your voice. You have power, and you can't even imagine how much of a difference it makes when people take the time to get educated on these subjects and use that education to empower themselves to get the change that we want. Last quick observation, I spend a lot of time talking to people about the problems related to waste in state and national parks. Make a difference as the consumer when you go to these places for recreation. Leave no trace. Make a point of planning your trip in such a way so that you bring out what you take in, because that will make a big difference. And those places are special to all of us. We have to protect them for the future.
Yes, we agree. Thank you so much, Josh. And we have some great conversations happening in the chat. Like Courtney said, work for local government, get involved with your local government. You can make some big changes there. We're in that day and age where this is becoming a popular thing in our local communities, but we need to actually educate and make those changes. Local ordinances, passing bills, buying the little campers, going to a retailer to refill. That helps everyone out in the end. It helps the environment out. So I just want to say thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you, Courtney, and thank you, Nate. Thank you, Josh, for joining us today on your Saturday. This has been a really great conversation. We've been putting all the links and social media handles in the chat. Please follow, get on to the email listservs, and you can stay up to date with the things that are happening. And I just want to say to everyone here, thank you so much for joining us. we'll be starting our next sessions at 2. And so, take your break, 10-minute break. I'll stay on just for a little bit here. And make sure that you're registered, because we are having our raffle at the end of the day. We have 7 gifts, like 7 things to raffle off. So we're super excited. So make sure you stay along for that, happening around 3 p.m. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining, and yeah, see you at the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Nate.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Kamryn.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you able to end the recording?
I saw that earlier. Yes, I can.
Okay, please do that.